Let's get some analysis on what Teffo's arrest means for the criminal justice system and, more importantly, the Meyiwa murder trial. We're joined by Whistleblower Advocate, that's John Clarke, who's also a writer. Mr. Clarke, thank you very much for your time. Can I start off with the conversation you had with Advocate Malesela Teffo's wife yesterday? I understand you spoke to her. What is she thinking as she saw the visuals that everybody has seen in South Africa now?
Well, it's interesting because she wasn't surprised. I mean, I see Advocate Nell says he couldn't believe that the police were doing this. To her, it came as absolutely no surprise. She was expecting it, and it's almost a sense that the fact that it's now happened, at least we can now get on with things, because she obviously has his wife and the mother of his 3 children, has been the rock of support to him to help him keep focus and to ensure that that he fulfills his mission and his vocation. And that's really somebody that we are dealing with now, somebody who has a passionate desire for justice.
We're going to talk about the brief background that Advocate Malesela Teffo has with the South African Police Service. When you say the wife wasn't surprised, in fact, she had been expecting it, tell us more about what it is that this family has been sitting on, almost waiting for the inevitable until it did happen, and lest I say that in Hollywood fashion.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I was trying to get my mind off things to watch one of my favorite police dramas last night, and was boring by comparison. But yeah, my involvement in this came about because when Advocate Teffo was arrested in October, November last year, my first interview with him was in the holding cells in Johannesburg Magistrates Court, and his attorney at that point was there to help see if we could make sure he got out of that cell and got bail. And as I got to know him, what really concerned me is how the impact that this was having on his children. I mean, he's an incredibly devoted father. He's got a 3-year-old daughter who was very traumatized by the fact that her father was put through this.
Yeah.
And you know, we can almost make the case that this, you know, in all matters concerning the child, their rights are paramount. I mean, that's in our Constitution and our Bill of Rights. So, nevertheless, he's wanting to be able to look his children in the eye as they grow up, and to them to be proud of him. And his wife shares that same conviction, that they want to see somebody who does the job of what a lawyer should do. Use the law as an instrument for social justice and to expose wrongdoing.
The understanding, John Clarke, is that the arrest of Advocate Malesela has nothing to do with the Senzo Meyiwa murder trial. It's on a separate matter of alleged assault and trespassing. Do you know what that is about? What did he do or allegedly do?
Well, he was representing one of his clients, and understand that he has been now a labor lawyer with great success in representing police officers that have been wrongfully dismissed. And he goes at it like a bull at a gate, and he was wanting to, as I recall, get documentation from the police headquarters, and they basically ambushed him and arrested him there and locked him up, and they said he was trespassing. Wow. Now, the case was you know, eventually, you know, through that intervention in December last year, there was a notice put out, and I have the document there, which says that to all police officers, or not to effect any arrest on him over this particular case, because it was effectively trumped up. So that with that background, of course, people can say, well, all sorts of conspiracy theories, but you know, you're talking about analysis. I actually try and do synthesis, which is a complementary process of, and in fact, it's about circumstance. And, you know, Advocate Nell has been strong about the fact that, circumstantial evidence, put it all together, and it weighs something.
Yeah.
And I'm wanting to put it in a larger context and say he was a police officer for 17 years, I think it was, so he knows the inner workings of them, and somewhat uniquely, he worked his way up, developed a network of understanding, and then did law and graduated as a lawyer, and basically with the same basic motivation of seeking justice and exposing wrongdoing, just simply now put on his advocate robes and all the rest to actually continue the job.
Yeah.
The problem in South Africa is that our police system has not transformed. There are still vestiges of the past which still contaminate and affect things. People who actually just not well trained and not doing their job properly. And he's basically been poking a very big bear to actually say, well, and obviously has made us enemies. So that's why those of us who have got alongside him have done so in a similar way that I did with Richard Spoor. Now, you know him. In fact, it's almost becoming what my job in life is, to be alongside lawyers when they get wrongfully arrested. Richard Spoor was arrested 3.5 years ago in the Kolobeni thing when the Minister of Minerals was talking there in a most bizarre situation, not unlike this one. Now, that was farce. Unfortunately, this is tragedy because we're now dealing with a family of Senzo Meyiwa who are themselves now divided, holding out hope. And over such a long period of time, people will then need closure, so they will develop and construct a narrative that they can. And that's why we need this court case.
It's been Mr. Clarke, you talk about Malesela Teffo poking a big bear, and that bear, I take it is the South African Police Service. Why do you hold the view that these are intimidating or intimidation tactics by the police? What is it that they are afraid of?
Well, let's make a clarification in saying it's not the South African Police Service as an institution necessarily.
Right.
It's the current leadership that has basically forsaken its mandate of providing services to society in terms of crime prevention and prosecution. And I believe there's something of I called it an uncivil war. From Joe Biden used that term, in the police. I mean, this morning I had one of Dan's other clients, a police officer, a warrant officer, who he had successfully got reinstated. He said, John, what can we do about this?
So this is an officer who successfully gets reinstated into the service and was represented by Advocate Malesela.
in that case. And has managed, and there's several of them. There's another one, Patricia Machele, who was a whistleblower in the Free State gun registration unit, whatever they call it. And she blew the whistle on what's happening there, and she got mercilessly retaliated against in all sorts of kind of... Fortunately, the Human Rights Commission intervened in that thing. So we're talking about a state of systemic corruption within the police system that is very resistant to being trained. And unfortunately, the power over strategy that they seek to enforce has no defense against the truth. It can only attack and retaliate. Now, that's the pattern which I've seen with all the whistleblowers that I've been working with, that they suffer merciless retaliation, the weaponized use of disciplinary procedures against them particularly. We talk Martin Goyi, Tiro Holele, people in the National Lotteries Commission have blown the whistle. So we're seeing a pattern of the very people that are going to help South Africa come to terms with the very inconvenient truths about corruption. They're trying to, last kick of the dying horse type initiative of trying to suppress that truth. It doesn't work.
So what hope is there, John Clarke, that this case, because let's not forget what is at the center here. It's Senzo Meyiwa, the family that needs to get closure. It's been 8 years. There have been 2 teams of the South African Police Service that investigated this matter, and I suppose one of those teams fell by the wayside, and then we saw in yet another dramatic fashion 5 people being presented in court, and they are said to be possibly the culprits who may have done this. In fact, before you answer that question, there's a soundbite from Julius Malema. He was addressing on Wednesday on the occasion of the Human Rights Commission. And he was speaking about the corrupting of the criminal justice system in South Africa. I just want us to have a listen for a moment.
The whole correctional service is rotten and corrupt to the core. They go and take convicted criminals to go and kill people outside and return them into prison because they will not be suspect. If you doubt, look at the so-called killers of Senzo Meyiwa. When Senzo Meyiwa was killed, those people were in prison. How did they kill Senzo Meyiwa? It is because the correctional service is corrupt. It releases prisoners to go and kill people, and then they go back.
All right, so just to set the context here, that's pure speculation. Julius Malema is a politician. He knows nothing about the law. But what he's saying there, might South Africans start believing what he is saying based on what is happening around this case?
Well, social work is always trained to look on the bright side and to make lemonade out of the bitter lemons of life. And the irony of it is that this action by the police has actually brought people together on common cause that were otherwise somewhat at odds with each other. I mean, for Gerrie Nel, for example, he and I were chatting in the courtroom yesterday morning, and he has a watching brief for some of the family. I have a close relationship with Sofiso. So we're now saying, how can we make sense of this? And what Gerrie Nel and I agreed upon, and I hope that Julius Malema would sign up to this as well. We need a prosecution process and a policing process that is absolutely independent without fear, favor, or prejudice. That's the issue here, is when the capture of a prosecuting authority and the police. And how to remedy that? Well, I just go with what my friend Willie Hofmeyr has to say. We need to have IPID's role expanded to not just investigate police misconduct, but prosecutorial misconduct. Because as I was in court yesterday and seeing how Advocate Teffo had basically exposed what looked to be a really bad job done, and also we were able to present a narrative that the forensic officer had only arrived 5 hours after the murder or the killing, and that the crime scene had already been tampered with. So and that's now speculation. That's why we need a criminal justice system that works. Rigorous cross-examination, getting to the truth, and that's where Gerrie Nel and I agreed. Let's make sure the evidence gets properly led, properly interrogated, and then a judgment made that is based on evidence and facts. And unfortunately, politicians will tend to always run with conspiracy theories because people want, there's almost like an attraction for that. Yeah. I'm particularly careful about buying into these complex, conspiracy theories. I go very much with what Occam's razor. The simplest explanation is usually the most likely. Not always, but usually. We don't need to be conspiratorial about it. We just need the facts, and we need a system that's going to work to get them out there.
Let me press the pause button there, John. In fact, we're going to bring into the conversation a spokesperson of the Economic Freedom Fighters. And we're not trying in any way to politicize this, but those are very interesting comments that were made by the leader of the EFF. Sinawo Tambo, you speak for the EFF. Has your party taken a position about what is actually happening with this Senzo Meyiwa case, or was your leader merely making reference to this case given how long it's taken for this family to finally get some justice?
Good morning to your guest and to your viewers, Polly. I think firstly you must take exception to your statement which you just made that Julius Malema knows nothing about the law. It's partly false. An individual who crafts the law can't know nothing about it. But that's besides the point.
I take that on the chin.
The President and Commander-in-Chief of the EFF was speaking on behalf of the organization, and you're correct the manner in which this case has dragged on for over 8 years, with a change in the investigating officers, with the dark cloud that hovers over it in terms of those individuals who were in the household at that time who seemed to be unable to give us direct answers, casts a cloud of doubt on how the correctional services have handled this matter. And yesterday just put the final nail in the coffin in terms of our suspicion that an advocate who is renowned for exposing corruption within the police services, who is renowned for being very volatile with those who seem to stifle the arm of the law, was arrested in an excessive and unnecessary manner by a tactical response team inside the court of law, and not as only an attempt to humiliate him as we outlined in our statement. So the position we are taking is that this was excessive, it was unnecessary, it only served the point of intimidation, but also of distracting us from the core arguments that Advocate Teffo was making in court yesterday. What they have done is just cast further doubt, perhaps even further pain on the loved ones and those who are close to Meyiwa, and prolonging this case and creating further speculation which may not be necessary. And I think it must lead us to connect the dots, as many like to say here in this country, that why would Advocate Teffo be arrested inside the court of law on a warrant of arrest which is said to have been issued in January, which he claims has expired? Why must it be affected during proceedings of this trial? What attempt was that? What is being attempted to be achieved by conducting this in such a manner? To use a tactical response team to arrest an advocate as if he's a cash-in-transit heist gangster or a murderer or a hardcore criminal just reveals an act of intimidation.
Yeah. All right. Let me ask you this final question. You know, oftentimes it is said, and in fact it is by your leader as well, that he normally gets information before we, members of the media, and sometimes it takes pride in poking fun at us for how late we are sometimes with this information. Was he purely being speculative on Wednesday, or is he pointing towards a certain direction?
Look, I don't think it's any inside information. I don't think it takes any inside information for one to read a pattern of behavior or a pattern of trend when it comes to the Meyiwa trial. There's a constant dramatic effect in terms of everything that happens with this case. There's people send their lawyers on a watch brief even though they are going to be witnesses in the same matter. Tactical response teams coming to court to arrest an advocate after he grilled a policeman there who could not provide adequate answers. So there's a pattern of behavior over the past 8 years in terms of this case which has dragged on since the moment in which the Bafana captain was shot. Yeah. And if we can observe patterns of behavior, we can reach certain conclusions that may ultimately be proven right. And this doesn't mean any undue influence or undue access to information within the correctional services. It just takes foresight and takes an ability to analyze the situation. And I think much more is going to be revealed once Advocate Teffo is released and allowed to speak, and as this case proceeds and is no longer delayed, hopefully going into the future.
Sinawo Tambo, thank you very much for your time. It speaks for the economic freedom fighters. John, let's conclude it in studio.
Can I comment on what he said?
Very briefly, I'm out of time.
Invite him to say, please, let's talk, because Parliament has a role to play. It makes the law. So Julius Malema must know something about the law. Sure. And we really need an inter-party ministerial parliamentary process to ensure that the integrity of the legislature is now improved on this thing, so that there's legitimacy back into the system. So thank you for that.
All right. John, very briefly, it's quite interesting what you've mentioned, that you are in the corner of Sifiso Meyiwa, who holds the view that the people before court right now accused of killing his brother are simply a diversion. Someone is being protected. That is the view that he holds, which is why he has fallen off with Advocate Nel. Why are you in his corner? Do you believe his version?
Now, I haven't adopted the narrative. Social workers are social workers, they're not judges. My point is about process. It's about ensuring that the most valuable part of the criminal justice system is cross-examination in court. That's something which, social workers can't do that. Our whole temperament isn't towards interrogation. When you see our Advocate Teffo in court and Nel when he was in court, that's what we need. We need to have people who are able to do that and to be able to do it knowing that there isn't an agenda and that knowing that the police minister is not interfering. That's my biggest...
Do you believe
concern.
he's interfering in this one?
Well, I'm interfering in the running of the police in a way that is way out of out of his boundaries. Police ministers should not be doing it. He's also the minister of IPID. You know, that also falls under his portfolio. IPID is there to investigate police protection. There's no proper checks and balances there. And I believe that the best thing that President Ramaphosa can do is fire him and appoint Dan Teffo as a Minister of Police.
John Clarke, thank you very much for your time and insights here. Really, it has been a fruitful chat. Thank you so much indeed.